Which states have I been to the most of? In case you're wondering where this video comes from, I was trying to make a video about the states I've been to the most often, but after getting stuck in so many technicalities, I was on state number 7 by 13 minutes. And I knew that with all 30 states I've been to, even though the video was going to pick a pace a little bit, I did not want a 40-minute video on this topic. So, states that I've explored the most extensively is going to be a much easier topic. Less, well, actually almost more subjective, but I can just talk about which cities I've been to and which roads I've been on. So, obviously my home state, New York, I've explored pretty extensively, but I've left several regions of the state untouched. For example, on Long Island itself, I have never actually been east of Riverhead, except for the one time I was taking a ferry that went out of Orient Point. So I can include the North Fork. I can't include the South Fork, though. I've never been, really anywhere that is east of Riverhead when you go south. First I've been to is that Riverhead Aquarium, and also the Tango Outlets nearby, and Splish Splash. So Long Island, I have some pretty good exploration until you get past Riverhead, in which case I've been on the North Fork, which is very thin, never to the South Fork. Obviously, in New York City, I have been to extensively. There's should be quite a few videos on my channel of me being in New York City. Maybe there's less than I think. I don't know. I've been to so much of New York City, it's not even funny. Going up through Westchester, I haven't been to Westchester very much at all, but I have been on a lot of the roads through Westchester to try to connect up. And I've taken many different routes throughout. I've taken 287 most of the time I crossed through Westchester, 95 to 287. I've also been on the Cross County once. And it's just that general story. I don't know. But there's definitely been a lot of extensive exploration of Westchester. How I expand throughout the rest of New York, though, mainly goes along the thin I-87 corridor. I have been on the New York Thruway from exits 4, which is down in Yonkers, to 50, which is in the Buffalo area. It was also one of the areas shut down by multiple lake-effect snowstorms, both in November and in December. You might have heard about that. Thankfully, I was in that area in July, so when there's no lake-effect snow, because it can't snow in July, can't really snow past late May, not Lake May. As far as heading north, I have actually been on all of I-87 in New York, but it was a bit of a stretch for me to get there, mainly because of what I did going up I-87. And I've never been in any part of New York north of 90, well, significantly north of 90, off the I-90 corridor, that's west of I-87. That I have not done yet. So no significant exploration of that area. I haven't been to Chautauqua County ever. As far as southern New York, based on a detour, I'm actually good on the southern T in 86. As far west as exit 50 for the Horseheads Airport, when a counselor had to go rent a car, and because they were under 25, it's a lot more of a pain to go rent a car, and they had to go all the way out to the Elmira Airport, which is in Horseheads. That was as far west as we had to go on 86, and I've been on the rest of the Southern Tier Expressway heading throughout the rest of New York. It's a giant expressway, too. But I also, besides a small part of I-88, have not been west of that. So as far as exploration in New York, past New York City, what areas of upstate have I been to? Well, I went apple picking somewhere in Rockland County back in 2010. But my real exploration in upstate New York did not begin until 2019. Then we went to Lake George and the surrounding areas, then out to Cooperstown for the Baseball Hall of Fame, into Howell's Cave, then we went down to a hotel in Armonk, and then went back home. Also, it involved having a lunch in a mall in Saratoga Springs. 2020 was the year of COVID, so there was no more upstate exploration. But in 2021, it came back with a trip out to Niagara Falls, then to the Six Flags Darien Lake, which is in Darien Lake, then with a hotel in Batavia along the way. Then we went to a laser tag place in Rochester, went down to the Villa of Roma where we had to make that crazy detour to there with a stop in Cortland too, and then we had to make our crazy detour. The Villa of Roma is in Callicoon, New York, and you know, after that it was a trip home, and I remember I was on a Bear Mountain Bridge on that one, which connects Orange to Westchester, and I can say I was on the US 9 in that part of Westchester too. I got way too excited there. Now, as far as the rest of New York goes, in my 2022 Upstadia travels, I mainly just went up. I know I stopped in Albany, and there were a few other stops along the way up 87, but I don't exactly know where. I know we made a pit stop very close to the Canadian border. Very close to the Canadian border. We made a stop in Champlain County, and I forgot in 2021 we also went to Southwoods Camp, which is all the way up in Essex County. It's also not very good. I remember giving it a 3-star review on Google Maps, and I kind of regret it. On the other hand, it was so breathtakingly beautiful that it automatically deserves 2 stars just for that alone. Also, my toes hurt. So that was all my New York exploration. Most of the state I can say I've conquered, but there's a lot of places I still have yet to go to. Now, New Jersey, I can say I've been to almost all of the state. I haven't been to the very far northwest part of the state. And I haven't been in the area connecting Pennsville down to Cape May. Have been to Cape May, however. I don't know how much of the eastern shore of New Jersey I was on. And I know I wasn't in a lot of the northern part of New Jersey, though I know I was in the county that's east of Sussex. Or maybe Action Creek is in Sussex. And I know I have driven on I-80 throughout all of New Jersey. And also taken in the 95-76 corridor, and was also on 78 throughout all of New Jersey. So New Jersey, almost all the state I could say I've at least driven through. Where I actually was New Jersey, that is variable, and also not really that relevant. Moving on, Connecticut is a state that I'd love to say I went to more of it than I did. I only went to Northwest Connecticut to go to Kent for Club Getaway. When our camp took us there, I did not like Club Getaway at all. I was never consistently up Western Connecticut. It was either that southwestern corner along 95, although we did once make a stop in Greenwich. And there's also a Connecticut Welcome Center there. Again, up the corridor into Greenwich, or it was at Club Getaway where you sneak on Connecticut Route 55 into US 7 into Connecticut Route 341. It's actually quite close to the New York border. I was in Hartford multiple times, and when we drove through into Massachusetts up to Maine, we had to then cut across Hartford by taking 84 into 90, but we didn't make any significant stops. So I got to the countryside, I was on 95 consistently throughout Connecticut, and I also was on I-395. So as a result, that is another interstate that I could probably, another state that I could say I've probably been to most of, but a lot of the more interior sections, a lot of the northwest part of Connecticut, I haven't been to yet. Rhode Island, I only really went there once to go to the Children's Museum, but given how small the state is and how 95 pretty much cuts across most of the state, I could pretty much say I went to everywhere relevant. Although portions of the Northwest I haven't been to, and I definitely haven't been to any of the islands off Rhode Island yet. Moving on to the state of Massachusetts itself, we're going to go up New England and then go down, because it does get simpler as we go through. Massachusetts, I was on the Massachusetts Turnpike ever since you hit up with I-90 in Springfield, because I went to Six Flags New England. I wasn't consistently on it so much so, but I was definitely on a large part of it. I was definitely on the I-84 connector that really isn't in Massachusetts but connects down into Connecticut. I was definitely in Boston, so I was on a lot of the roads in Boston. I went up to Salem, and then I obviously took 495 to connect back into New Hampshire. Though I was never on 495 south of New Hampshire. I mean, south of I-90. Not New Hampshire, I-90. I've never been to the Cape Cod area of Connecticut, which is quite far. I've also never been to northwestern, or really even southwestern Massachusetts. I haven't really been to northern Massachusetts in general, except for the areas north of Boston. Haven't really even been to southern Massachusetts, except for Six Flags New England. My Massachusetts adventures are quite lacking. My New Hampshire is even worse, because the 95 connector barely even cuts through New Hampshire. Massachusetts to Maine is probably the closest corridor that is cut off by another state. I really think it is. And even going to the Great Bay National Wildlife Refuge, which is in Portsmouth, it doesn't really give me that many points. Our camp did go on a more extensive exploration throughout New Hampshire. We stayed in a hotel in Manchester, but then cut across to Maine, so that's not really that much traveling. But then, when we came back to Polo Caves Park, we entered the state through North Conway, which meant that we take 93 to get to the Polo Caves Park, and then pretty much shoot down, I think, I-93 in order to get to the baseball game in Manchester to see the Fisher Cats beat the Fighting Phils. It's minor league, by the way. And then, eventually, yes, we could proceed back down to the Hotel Nashua before the next day we were going to the aquarium, which is located in Mystic. 53. Kind of hoped it was warm outside. 53 isn't bad for March, but given how we've been hitting 50s consistently throughout January and February, I kind of would have hoped for more. The average high temperature in both January and February was just shy of 49 degrees, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. Now moving on to the state of Maine. Maine is a state, so New Hampshire, now I realize it, because of how narrow the state is, I pretty much actually really went to the state in the southern half of it. Maine is a state that I've mainly just hugged the coast along, and unless you consider Bangor to be the interior, I've never been to the interior. I've also never been to any part of northern Maine. As down east Maine, where Bangor and Bar Harbor are, I still consider to be in southern Maine. I stayed at a hotel in Wells, Maine, and I went to the main diner there. We toured Kennebunkport, went to the Rachel Carson National Wildlife Refuge. We went to Portland, and then camp took us to Bar Harbor on a failed whale watching expedition. By the way, there was no Acadia National Park involved. And following that, we then went back up to Bangor. As far as driving, we took 95 all the way out to Bangor, and then had to take a road down from Bangor to get to Bar Harbor. But splitting up the other way, we then drove through Augusta, and then got off on US 2. And because of the way it takes into New Hampshire, that's the closest to the interior of Maine I can say I've ever been to. Just saying. I do remember my Bar Harbor trip extensively. It was very cold there. The temperature was only 61 degrees, and it was cloudy too. The whale watching tour I heard, if we had gone on it, would have been in the 40s, but it got canceled. That being said, 61 degrees is still very cold, and so there were quite a few people wearing sweatpants, which is not normally what you see in July, but in a place like Bar Harbor, you can absolutely see it in July. I mean, Bar Harbor in the summer is like San Francisco, Although in the winter, Bal Harbour is obviously much colder than San Francisco. I mean, San Francisco is a place where February can literally be warmer than July. That can't happen, like, in most parts of the country. Not that I've ever been to San Francisco, though I've been to most of the other parts of Cali. I'll get to it later. So Maine, I can say I haven't really been to. Kind of just hugged along the southern part of the state and the southwestern part of the state. Vermont, well, I have driven extensively on 89 down until it hits 91. I did make a stop in Burlington and also at the Vermont Teddy Bear Factory and also then at the Ben and Jerry's. We then drove across mainly southeastern Vermont, staying in Proctorsville. We went to the Calvin Coolidge National Historic Site, which was actually closed. And then we also went to the Green Mountain National Forest in the area surrounding Manchester. We also went to the Quechee Gorge State Park. As far as the state of Vermont goes, then on the way down, I think we didn't actually go on 91. I think we didn't take 91. We instead went on, cut across the southwestern part of the state on windy country roads until we got to Bennington and can connect back to New York. So I did drive through Rensselaer County in New York. As far as Vermont, I can say I've been to a lot of it. Not the northeastern part of the state though. Have been through the southwestern part. Also wasn't in the southeastern part of Vermont. Well, I was in the general southeast, but not the southeast corner. Vermont State I've actually demolished a pretty good chunk of, especially considering the fact that I was only there for 3 days. Then again, it is a small state. Pennsylvania. I've been to many places in Pennsylvania. Dorney Park, Hershey Park, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Kalahari. But my overarching problem is the fact that my connections. I have been across all of I-80 throughout Pennsylvania. And also pretty much all of the Pennsylvania Turnpike I could say I've been on. But in between them, I haven't really been on anything. My exploration in northern Pennsylvania has actually been pretty bad. Really, I haven't been any further north than central Pennsylvania. I was also on 78 throughout Pennsylvania. I mean, really, well, I've been to so much in southern Pennsylvania. There wasn't really anything that I was really in northern Pennsylvania, except Camp Point Tell, where you enter in through the northeastern corner of the state. Well, not quite the northeastern corner, but a northeast portion. I will say that when things like I-80 start off, it might seem like northern Pennsylvania, but then the state boundary shoots up to the 42nd parallel, and at that point, there's really no fair way you could say on how Pennsylvania is. For such a small state, you might be surprised at how little I've been through Delaware. Considering that it's only in the Biden Welcome Center in Newark, the only place I've been to Delaware is cutting across the 295 corridor. It's only about like 11 miles maybe. I think it's a little bit more than that. Maybe like 15 miles. And it's all of Delaware that I can ever say I've been to. Again, kind of sad for such a state as small as Delaware, but I really have not explored Delaware. Maryland, I could say I was definitely on 95 on the entire Maryland portion of it, making plenty of stops along the way throughout that area. But I never really got to go west of the 95 area at all. And I haven't also been seriously east. I've mainly just hugged along the corridor, which does include many of the northern DC suburbs and Baltimore. I've been west of it and east of it, obviously. I just haven't been that far away. I've always been on the I-95 corridor when I've been in Maryland. DC I've actually been to a good part of, but it's also 68 square miles. The good old state of Virginia. I've been to Western Virginia when I flew into DC and had to drive all the way out to Charlottesville to go to a wedding. That's far, and I don't remember the route, but I think it was 66 to 81, or largely along that route. So I've obviously seen sites of that entire area. I went to where George Washington's home place was. I've also was on the entire 95 corridor throughout the state of Virginia, and also penetrated out onto 64 into the Hampton Roads area. I've been to Richmond before. I was also in many cities in the area like Williamsburg and Virginia Beach. I've also driven through many others like Newport News. So I can say a lot of travel experiences in the Hampton Roads. I have been to Alexandria before. So there's a lot of places in Virginia that I really just can say comfortably that I've been to. North Carolina, I don't want to say it entirely hugs around the I-95 corridor because it doesn't. But the only other place I've been to is getting to Kitty Hawk and the First Flight National Memorial. Besides that, yes, it was on the I-95 corridor. Actually, no, it wasn't. I'm an idiot. Because I forgot when we went to Carowinds in Charlotte and also Fort Mill, South Carolina. We had to take the I-77 briefly and then take I-85 throughout the state of North Carolina. Although most of it was at night, so I couldn't see that well. And then I was also on a lot of the I-85 corridor in Virginia, all of it, until it then connects back to 95. And then we obviously went to Midlothian from there. South Carolina, again, 95, I've been on it throughout the entire way. I was in Hilton Head, so I take the US 278 to get there. Charleston, which does require going on a significant part of I-26. And when we went there from Hilton Head, we took a lot of US Route 17, so a lot of the back roads, just in order to get there. In Charleston, I did many things like the South Carolina Aquarium and the Isle of Palms Beach and the horse tour. So I've done a lot in the city of Charleston. And then we took 26 and another step up to 77 in Columbia, and that's how we got to the Carowinds in the first place. Georgia, I definitely do remember doing a big tour of Savannah, and I was also at a Cracker Barrel in Pooler. Having said that, I've hugged entirely along the eastern part of the state and was really only on the I-95 corridor as far as that goes. Florida, I do have a lot of exploration of. We made a stop in Jacksonville once, and I was on 95 as far as I-4 goes. And I was along the entire I-4 corridor because I've taken trips to both Tampa and Disney World in Orlando, which actually goes out to Bay Lake. The 2023 Disney trip did not really actually add that much of my area. The only thing I think new that I went to on that trip was Animal Kingdom, which I don't think I've actually been to before, and the airport in Orlando to begin with, because we always flew in through Tampa. That being said, 2022 did add a lot of new areas. I've actually never been as far as Miami before, so I was at the end of I-95 when it ends to US 1. I went really far south on the Florida Turnpike. Both of them, we stopped at Boca Raton where our hotel was, but I penetrated pretty far into Western Florida. First, we went to the Everglades Holiday Park, and then I went to the actual Everglades National Park, which is past Homestead. Even the visitor center we went to was actually really far in, and we couldn't make it past that because otherwise the park would have closed if we had gone further west into the Everglades wasteland of Florida. But I like natural wasteland, so it's fine. West Virginia, I only glazed along the I-70 corridor, although I did go to Ogla Bay Park along the way. Ohio's a state where at first I only peeked into the part of the state around Flushing for dinner. But then we took the entire Ohio Turnpike corridor across the state, making a stop in the Kalahari and Sandusky along the way on the way to Chicago. I can also say I was on I-90 glazed throughout the entire northern part of the state, although the only stops we made were in the western part of the state in Michigan City, Indiana. Illinois, I've only been to for Chicago purposes. Heading on south to Kentucky, really only the I-65 corridor up to Mammoth Caves. I was on 65 from Nashville up, and I was also on 40 from Memphis to Nashville. I extensively was in both Memphis and Nashville, and was also in the Mammoth Caves, as well as we made a stop in Bowling Green on the way back home. Besides that, we also made a stop at the Tina Turner Museum, but I'm not sure what it is. It's right off exit 56 of I-40 Hava. That also meant that I was in Arkansas, but only as far as West Memphis goes. So only the very east central part of the state and only the very northwestern corner of Mississippi in South Haven. And, well, as far as the rest of things go, heading further west, we get to a very isolated place. And then we have Canadian provinces to talk about too. Fun. So, we're gonna go not in chronological order, but up from Arizona, through Nevada, through California, through Oregon, into Washington, because they make a straight line and I like those. So, Arizona, we flew into Phoenix. We then went to the Grand Canyon with our hotel in Sedona. And we then went to Prescott Valley. And then we kind of turned around. So I was on the entire I-17 corridor. I was also on pretty much all of I-40 west of Flagstaff by driving on it. Actually, it's not true because once we got to US 93, we then had to shoot up that to get to the Hoover Dam area. Then, from there, we were also obviously north of 17, heading on US 180 into the Grand Canyon National Park. I was on I-10, but only in the inner loop around Phoenix, so it doesn't really count that much because I did mention Phoenix. And Prescott Valley was also a bunch of side roads in order to get there, mostly from Sedona. Now, as far as Nevada goes, it was a very small area. I did go to Boulder City for the Lake Med National Recreation Area, which, by the way, hard to enjoy when it's 105 degrees outside. No, I did not make that number up. See, the Grand Canyon was actually nice and temperate 82 degrees. So, to go from the, 104 degrees of Phoenix, I think it was like a 104 heat index. I think the air temp struggled to get past 100. Then to go make a massive cool down to 82. Only to then, when we went back to Sedona, then it was back at the low 90s again. And then to shoot back up to 106, which is what it was in Las Vegas, which we then had to connect on, again, I-11 up there. That was a bunch of weather whiplash. You could tell it's hot there when it's 78 degrees as a morning low temperature, but it's not even that humid when that happens, which would actually even further increase the temperature because humidity can keep the temperature down. Makes the heat index flare up, but it keeps the actual air temperature down, which is why getting 200-degree heat index is practically impossible on this earth. I mean, I guess it's not so hard if you're in the Persian Gulf region, but I've never been there. Nor do I really want to go there. Then on Nevada, we had to then, not that many stops, but it's like I-15 down. So I was in this loop in the very southern corner of the state around Las Vegas. And then I-15 connects to California. So I was on the I-15 corridor. As we then made a hotel stop in Victorville. I was on that as far as the Inland Empire. And then we took a bunch of roads driving through the Inland Empire. I was extensively throughout the LA metro area, as well as San Diego. And we also went to the Six Flags Magic Mountain, which was further up in California, along I-5 though. I-5 does actually curve inland, so I was on the I-5 corridor for the southern 180 miles of the state of California. And I know I was extensively in LA and San Diego. We also then had to backtrack out through the Inland Empire to get back onto I-15. That was a weird maneuver. So I could say that the southwestern coast of California pretty much hugged. Oregon I've only been to mainly for Portland. Washington I did go along the entire I-5 corridor, but I only made a few stops along the way, like at Castle on the Rock, and then Olympia, and then Seattle, Everett, and then further north we made a rest stop, and then it was all into British Columbia. But I at least drove along the entire western side of Washington, but I realized it was only again on that I-5 corridor as far as Washington goes. British Columbia was really, I've only been to Vancouver, as well as the Surrey, British Columbia stop, border crossing. And really, the stretch from the U.S. border up on BC 99 up to the northern side of Vancouver isn't really that much. I can attest to that. I've done that drive before. Ontario, also not very extensive. Really only the southern part of the state from where the Niagara Falls border is up to Vaughan. And Quebec was also not super extensive. It was mainly, the only city I went to really was Montreal, as well as the also the border crossing at something, that duty-free shop somewhere in Quebec. Mainly it was along the Auto Route 15 corridor, then it was into Montreal, and we were only on the southern side of Montreal, and then it was back out another auto route that I forgot until it met up with I-89 in Vermont. So I bet you could try to look up that route. That's actually your assignment. You have to look up that route.